before we go, so you'll notice there's English and Anishinaabe Moin, and actually that is something we've been working on for a very long time. The state was struggling with wanting to allow us to have bilingual signage. But eventually we were able to get that going, and part of it was inspired by the WinHEC meeting in 2016 or 17 at Sámi University, because that was one of the sessions was about reclaiming spaces using our Indigenous language. So so we've got it happening here in the college, but also out in the city. Now our chief of police in the city is a descendant of the White Earth Nation, and so he has been planting seeds with businesses saying, I'll help you get the bilingual signage, and so we're moving now. It's good. Yeah.
Right. I think that's the least what they can do.
Right. Yeah. There's so much knowledge in the language, like speaking about place, like this is the place where walleye are. This is, those information. Trio support. They just got new space renovation in there. It's really nice in there. The Trio is a student support program, and you probably know more of this bit than I do.
Yeah, they're extra student support services for specifically helping students with transfer who are low income, documented disabilities, or first generation students. So they do a lot of workshops with students, like scholarship writing workshops, and they take them on classes or like trips to other schools that they might transfer to. So their focus is on helping students transfer into those four-year programs from here.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Oh, look, people's pets. How fun is that?
Oh, really?
So we have a program called GIS, Geo Information Systems.
Geographic Information Systems. It's all this mapping.
Oh.
And the person who developed the program and on campus, he was a brilliant man. And he passed away a couple of years ago. But he really, students loved this. Because he uses ArcGIS, he was like one of the first people involved with ArcGIS. And that partners really well with a lot of the environmental research that our students want to do or are doing, as well as the tribe. So this college is co-governed by the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior and the state of Minnesota. We're the only college in the nation to be co-governed like that. And that has to do with the vision of the tribal leadership in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And they recognized that partnering with the state was going to bring about more opportunities for their students. And our tribe currently is about 4,300 tribal members. Back then it was less. So they knew that our student body, if it was only to be from the tribe, would be very small. And so they knew it wasn't sustainable. So they wanted to partner with the state, and now it has grown. And we serve the most tribal students of any institution in the state, like percentage-wise. Our student body is the largest percentage of Native students of any institution in the state, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's because of that, because we're partnering. We educate, anybody who comes here who wants to get a degree here has to take a class on Anishinaabe culture and history. And if they want to get their degree from here. So that has gone really far into all of our programs. which many are service programs, law enforcement, nursing, human services, like chemical dependence, child development, yeah. And so when people have that education or that basic knowledge going into those fields, it really serves the population well. People out in the border towns or even further out have a better understanding of the tribal people, so they can better serve their needs. So, and we've been here for 35 years, I think. Yeah.
Already?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, and you're talking about our programming, so we have fine arts, child development, elementary education, the American Indian Studies degree. I know the Anishinaabe language certificate, like those are all the WinHEC accredited programs too.
Multimedia production.
Is multimedia one? Okay, yep. Is that part of the Anishinaabe, the Gikidasmanon there?
I believe so.
Okay, yep. And so those are like, specifically they have the, what do they call them, the cultural standards that are built in those 7. And then, I mean, so those are very specifically done that way, but we're also, like you said, everybody takes that class. Those, like criminal justice peace officer program, they're building in those aspects, even if it's not one of those WinHEC accredited programs, it's still being built in,
Yeah.
But
So-
you have mostly Anishinaabe students.
No.
We're about, about a third.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, about a third of our students.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think I overheard somebody talking to you about it, blood quantum, and so that factors into this counting of people. You know, so if somebody is enrolled, an enrolled tribal member, they are recognized by the federal government, who also is involved with some of our funding. So there, certain set of numbers goes to them. Enrolled and descendants. So if somebody is a grandchild of an enrolled person, that's for another set of numbers that go usually to the state or some programs with the federal government. However, you can go even further out, of course, because genetics and heredity just doesn't stop, And I would venture to say, if we were to talk to some of the students, especially the local students who attend here, that they have a historical connection to the tribal communities. They just aren't considered tribal members or descendants by a legal definition. Yeah. So I mean, it's we're all one community. Like we literally overlap. The reservation is like kind of like a wedge of cheese, and the city kind of overlaps in part of that, So it's hard to pull that apart, I think. Yeah. So anyway, so we've got a computer lab, and I think that's where we do the map programs as well. That's why
They have a big old printer for these posters in there.
Oh, you printed all this here.
Yeah, they've got a nice printer.
Yeah.
But
we don't have a key. So in here, the school drum, it's a large drum. It's called Badwe Dum, which means as voice carries far. And that drum was made in the early 2000s by a staff member and some students, along with guidance from a local drum maker. Over the 35 years, we've had various drums come and go, and then this one has been here the longest because probably the process by which we built it. It wasn't somebody else making it for us. And so that drum, they'll have practice tonight from 5 to 7.
Okay.
Down in the area, down in the commons. And sometimes there are some students who join that will dance and or sing or just hang out and eat chips. But yeah, so it's in there. Yeah. And there's some hand drums in there as well that were gifted to the tribe, to the college. Some men's drums and some women's drums. There's a history of, I'm trying to be neutral, a history of gender roles as defined by relearning culture in this colonized setting. So some gender roles are from pre-colonization, and some then were defined after colonization, and they have to do with this drum or drums. The big drum arrived in about 1850, 1860, and those rules with that drum are for that drum or that style of drum. Each person who is a drum keeper has been given the specific protocol for whatever drum they're carrying. And then the hand drums have a different set of protocol, and people who only learn about this larger drum sometimes try to apply the teachings of that larger drum to the hand drums. So there's been some neutral word controversy about about who can or cannot sound the different types of drums based on gender. I'm doing work and research to open up more of the older knowledge about those protocols. So sometimes people are all cool with that, and other times they are not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually asked someone at the powwow I went to, I said like, I don't see any women like drumming or singing.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't they doing that?
Yeah.
And the one answer I got was, yeah, it's because the women are considered like a higher level, like they are teachers or something like that they are teaching the men how to do the drumming, and so they're like just supervising if they're doing it correctly. I don't know, but it was like that was one answer I got about it. So
That's better than most.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Women as supervisors.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
women are supervisors of the drums.
Yeah.
That was the answer.
That's good. Where was that powwow?
The powwow was actually, it was actually Minneapolis, but the man that I asked about this, he was when I was in Canada, I asked him about it there.
Yeah, that's good.
Around about.
So our women here have been singing backup on the drum. They'll sing behind, the men will sing the lead and then the first part of the body of the song, and then the women will join an octave higher at the second half of the form, and then the entire form without the lead is repeated again. So the women will come in at two separate points of that form if they're singing backup. If you're singing with a hand drum, I've been working here for 28 years. We've had our women's hand drum group meeting here for about 22 years. And before that, people were singing just like solo, independently using their drums. And then coming together as a group is more recent history for the women's hand drums. And so doing that at the beginning, there were people that really were not appreciative of that type of expression, and in fact, sometimes there were rumors that that people would come and take them away from us. Nobody ever did. And since then, there have been more and more women singing with hand drums, and we were not the first. We were not the first people by any means. We learned it from elder women, and then there were groups that were begun in the 90s or the late 80s of women singing together with hand drums. It's kind of like, depending on where people are at in their knowledge of drumming traditions, if they've asked more questions as they go, or if they just kind of stay and say, this is what I know. And the Canadians have a different timeline, for these things, because things happen differently in Canada than they did in the United States, although similar. Yeah. And so the Canadians are much more, it's more of a common sense that of course women are drumming. And then down here, definitely in Minnesota, and they might have to do with the development of AIM, the American Indian Movement, which was primarily men as the leaders of that movement in the 1960s, 1970s, and there were women involved with AIM, of course, but they were not in the leadership positions. And so that's about the time that powwow started to gain more popularity, more common, more often. Powwow traditions were going out. And there were women who were singing on those powwow drums in Minnesota with their family. There was no question, men and women together. But then over time, it was like, oh, no, they shouldn't do that, you know. So we're bringing it back anyway, and we'll see how things go. Last spring, there was an entire powwow of women's drums in Canada. I'm not sure if it was Saskatchewan or Ontario, but yeah. So you know, who knows where things will go from here. But yeah, but we don't. The women here don't sing on this powwow drum. We sing with hand drums, and that's not my role to introduce that. But I do absolutely encourage all people to use their voice, to learn how to use their voice, so that they can use it in a confident, strong way, no matter how they're using their voice, because that's necessary, for the health of our nation. So yeah, so kids, women, men, I just encourage everybody to work on that, because it's more common that people are shy to do that. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, all right, I'll get off that soapbox. Okay. And here's our library.
Is this picture from your school?
This is actually one of my uncle's photos, and this is a powwow.
Veterans Park, right?
This is a powwow from Mashkawisen.
Oh, a powwow. Okay.
Yeah, we have a powwow grounds out on the reservation, and so this is a powwow photo from that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had the architects were very much in tune with what our founding president wanted to see. So there's lots of circles, lots of open space, lots of reminiscent of being in the forest. Everywhere on campus. These are some commercially tanned deer hides, I believe. Yeah, they seem like they're, yeah. We have progressed from commercially tanned to knowing how to tan them ourselves.
Oh, well
yeah.
done.
Yeah. There's actually an event December 5th, 6th, and 7th where they're doing some tanning. One of our extension programs called 13 Moons is having people doing brain tanning the hides and smoke tanning them. Yeah. So those are
fun.
good.
Yes,
Yeah. These are cool. We had some of our staff and faculty involved with making these star maps, and then learning about the various tribal nations' star maps. These are two of the original pieces of art that were made by Annette Lee and William Wilson, who Annette was a faculty here for a long time. She's down at St. Cloud, I believe now, and William has passed on. So here's the Anishinaabe, and this is the Dakota.
So it's like a lot of the tribes, they have different star maps.
Yeah.
For the same star.
Yeah.
Stars. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And also, like you have a different viewpoint of, depending on where and when you are living.
Yeah. We also have a star.
Yeah.
A story in the sky. Starry sky, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Guess what animal we have on the sky? We have
A reindeer. Yeah. There's a moose here.
Yeah.
And maybe a caribou. Oh no, he has a ram there. I don't see caribou. Huh. Interesting.
That's a lot.
We're going to.
Like dog and people and all kinds of people. There are probably stories like
Yeah.
this, like we also have in our culture.
Yeah.
Stories.
Yeah. Fireplace here, study rooms, but I just want you to see this relative back here, which
Yeah.
it is kind of controversial that he is here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There was a Fond du Lac. We have a moose hunt lottery every year. You know, not everybody can go hunt a moose.
Yeah.
So some people are then selected through the lottery, and then they go hunt the moose. So one of the tribal members hunted this moose, and then had him mounted, and then was going to give it to the college to be hung somewhere out in the open. And other tribal members are like, we don't do that. We don't display our relatives after we've, after we've taken their life. That's not okay. And so this tribal member, was like, oh, well, I did, right? And so then it was kind of like this back and forth, and this is where he ended up. Once it's already done, I think, it's more of a dishonor to leave him laying somewhere, right? So, but that's my opinion, and other people have different opinions.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so.
What are all the flags? Like I can see something Sámi.
Yeah, I think that's there because we had 2 years ago, I think, we hosted the World Indigenous Nations Higher Education Consortium, and the Sámi are very present in that consortium.
Yeah.
Jan, I forgot his last name. They always bring students when they come, and they have a large representation, so I'm guessing that they gifted us this. Yeah, I think I can read from the other corner, it says Winheck or something.
Winheck.
Yeah, 2016.
Or
Winheck.
19, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the other are tribal nations, except for the United States flag in the state of Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Various tribal nations that students come from that attend our college, but we don't have all of them. I don't remember the last number of how many different tribal nations are represented in our student body, but it is more than 11. We have in Minnesota 11 recognized tribal nations, federally recognized tribal nations. There are others that are kind of folded into the other, like Mille Lacs, there's Sandy Lake, or Bois Forte, there's Lake Vermilion. Different communities now, which back at the beginning of, when the treaties were signed, I don't know that they would have been so territorially linked. Because we're semi-nomadic, yeah. We travel from camp to camp, to harvest and survive. So down here, otters. Otters are a very important character in our teachings.
Otters?
Yeah,
Oh,
we have two here.
really?
Yeah, and in fact, like our cultural hero, whose name is Buju, he was. Partnered with the otter in a lot of the teachings, and the otter is very playful and plays tricks on him. Buju is like half man, half spirit, and he is often humorous. His stories are often humorous, and so the otter might have played tricks on him. And I can't tell any stories right now because we don't have any snow on the ground. That's when we normally would tell those stories, but we don't do that because those spirits are still potentially paying attention and might come to visit me, and so I don't necessarily want that.
Okay.
Yeah. So when the snow comes, they're sleeping.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've only
When it's snow, you can tell the stories then.
Yeah.
Is that what you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and who knows? I took in my PhD studies, I took a class called Critical Indigenous Theory. On one hand, it's looking at what is the critical Indigenous knowledge in order to like understand Indigenous peoples in a general sense, what's critically, important. But on the other hand, it was, let's really look and analyze these various teachings as to what, where they come from, how connected they are to other teachings, that kind of stuff. So I'm always thinking, like, okay, why don't we do it during the winter? Or why do we only tell stories during the winter? Part of it has to be practical reasons. Everything's practical, right? Yeah. So it has to be practical reasons. What were they doing during those storms or during the coldest part of the winter? They're busy, maybe inside making things, right? And you're gonna tell stories, Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep, so these are our campus values, our core values.
Okay.
So there's 5 of them, and we've recently, I think it was recently, we've started dedicating 1 word per semester. So like you'll see what it is. It's ménageritive in this semester. So
Outdoor classroom for food sovereignty initiatives, as well as I think the intention is that we might be doing some of that prep over there with like plant uses, drying, or harvesting. I thought we would be able to do animals there, but then it was like, no, we can't do that because, it would be hard to keep it safe for other people to use for other purposes, And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Yeah, right. But it's nice. There's a whole kitchen in that building that's like locked up, and then there's this open place and a place for a fire as well. And, yeah.
I know Environmental Institute has they've done a maple boil out there, so they were making maple syrup.
Oh, really? Nice.
In the library, and then this one goes through down to the floor, so you can kind of see what I was talking about with you got the first value there, and it goes along the whole hallway. So we'll see that on our way back.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Part of our creation story talks about the Boganagijik was just a hole in the sky, and there are historical people with that name that have carried that name throughout oral tradition and then like recorded written history that have been pivotal in how things have unfolded throughout time. So this is like a recognition of that part of our community or our tribe. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Our science programs have been involved over the years with other university initiatives on researching things such as the life cycle of wild rice, which is our staple food, and also environmental impacts of industry on the wild rice or the water. So we've had that connection, to stewardship all along, even in our sciences and math. And they were supposed to, we went through a whole, visioning process about who was going to get what spaces, right? When this was being, discussed and then built, we had the all-campus decision-making process, and we were tied with athletics. Music and performance was tied with athletics, as usual, and our president at the time was a coach, a football coach. So yeah, so this is the gym.
Yeah, so that's the gym. And next time we need a musician to be there.
Yeah, I know. So this is the gym. And my uncle is actually part of the staff here, and he has selected these pieces of art. He has he has a degree in art, and so these are different pieces. This is in reference to the first black person who lived in the area, and in all of the documentation from the Anishinaabe side, he was referred to as white or English, because anybody who wasn't Indian was white or English, Yeah, and so it just says something about how our perceptions of race are really they're based on time and opinion, and not necessarily on anything that is immutable. Is that right? I'm using that word? Okay.
Very
Yeah,
good at
yeah,
explaining
yeah.
things like diplomatically.
I'm a local politician, so yeah. This is a nursing program. I don't know if they let us go in there and poke around, but they've got all kinds of fun stuff in there, including like some dummies. So I was just looking, even in our literature, you can see the diversity of our students, and we might have out of a class of 40 students, there might be 1 or 2 who are Indigenous. But had we not had this program here, we wouldn't have those 1 or 2 Indigenous students getting educated. So that's, that is the philosophy behind what we call the Union of Cultures here.
Have you ever been to the Sita Museum in Inari in Finland?
No,
They have the coolest exhibit.
it took me a second to like envision what you were saying. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they have the coolest exhibit, and it goes like through the seasons and talks about like the relationship, like what's happening during that season. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, I didn't get to Inari. I was just in Finnmark up there.
okay.
Yeah, and then down through Norway. I don't know how I ended up. Means like together amazing things we're doing.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And so innovation.
Yep. Yeah. Bookstore.
Bookstore, but
Yeah. So I got my shirt, the shirt.
Cool. That's what we like.
Yeah.
well, yeah, because we just, what was it just?
And Carl Galboy is also a Finndian.
A Finndian.
Yeah. He's one of the old school Finndians. Yeah.
And you met his sister at UND.
Oh yeah.
Sorry?
You met his sister at UND.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was the Thunderbird Press that published his Fur Trade Nation book.
Yeah, we were talking about it. Yeah.
So that was just last year.
Oh, do you have any in here?
You got any copies of Fur Trade Nation, Bonnie?
Oh, I have a lot of copies.
Okay, good. Where might we find them?
There's some back there under the t-shirt. Or
Oh, here they are.
We could send one to you if you don't want to carry it with you traveling, or if you do want to take it and read it, you could. We could.
Yeah, see, you could get Liz's shirt. It's right here. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's, you'll find that in any of the bookstores around Duluth too, and that's really neat, I think.
Oh, yeah. This is a cool book, isn't it?
Did you get that email about Elin's visit?
I did.
Yeah.
Very excited.
She's a singer too. She's a singer. Yeah.
Yes, I was listening to some of her music.
Down there is our music room. You can hear drums. Our drum instructor is a guy who also teaches at the Fond du Lac Ojibwe School. He's amazing. I used to teach at the Fond du Lac Ojibwe School for 3 years. I was their music teacher. And then I got a call to sing opera over in Rome. And so I was like, I'm out of here. And I went and sang over there. And while I was singing, I said, I don't know if this is really what I want to do for the rest of my life. So because I'd already started teaching, so I got the bug, And yeah, and I came back and had to kind of like balance, what my singing needs and my teaching interest. And so I started teaching here in '97. Anyway, I always felt bad leaving the Ojibwe school without a music teacher, because once I left, they couldn't find somebody else to go. And this guy that's there now, I found him when I was doing some touring teaching, and he had just finished his degree and he was looking for a job. I said, hey, go over to Fond du Lac, I bet they'll take you. And he's done just fun, awesome things. They have a band, a student band, just like, it'll be like 5 keyboards, 2 drum kits, 1 or 2 bass players, 3 guitars, like not your normal band, right? And then there'll be like 6 girls that'll sing all the same line. They'll be just on the microphones, which never would have happened when I was there.
Oh, wow.
Because they were so shy. This was in 1992, 1995. Kids were still really shy. I mean, kids still are, but more of them. And because I'm from this reservation, I got a lot of advice from elders who would say, no, don't do that. no, you should only do this, you know, right?
Yeah.
But since he's not from here, he got away with everything. Yeah. And so they're like awesome. They go and they go to state competitions, and they're going to be at the Minnesota Music Educators Association, like playing. The kids will be playing there, which
Wow.
is very cool.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
And it's not like conservatory singing or music, you know, it's like rock. And teaching them in an unorthodox style, the same things that they learn, you know.
Wow.
Hey, Twee.
Lake Superior here.
Yeah.
Gitchi
Get you, Gummy.
Gummy.
It was just one of those happy accidents. I'm like, can we put the river in there? Because everyone was kind of like trying to make something fit and try to make, and I said, can we put water? Because that's really important, you know, and can we put the river in there? And apparently the designer laid it on there, and it was like, oh, it doesn't have to be changed at all. It just fit, yeah. Yeah. So this is a sweetgrass road. That's a phrase you might hear in Indian country. Sweetgrass is one of our sacred medicines that that plant, when it is utilized either in like a smudge or a tea or other way that we might use it, like when I drive, I have a sweetgrass braid on my dashboard. That's like my insurance, you know.
Not really insurance. It's pulled over, she pulls over.
But it's to bring good things, you know. It invites good, positive things. So that's how we decided on having the sweetgrass braid here. And then there's 13 circles that's supposed to represent the 13 moons. But if you analyze that too much, it doesn't really. But because the 13 moons are all the same. You know, they count them like new moon to new moon to new moon, which would be 13 black circles. But that was not very visually enticing, I guess. So we have like different phases.
But there's still 13 of them, right?
And there's still 13, yeah. A teaching lodge out there, kind of. It's, you know, covered by tarps, which is what we do now. But it is trees, probably either maple or maybe poplar, that are bent to be in that shape. And then this is our medicine garden here, which we want to represent what we call our 4 sacred medicines: sweetgrass, sage, tobacco, and cedar. And then around the edge we have some echinacea, some of the medicinal plants that people are using, you know, to maintain their health. And sometimes people will come here and offer their tobacco. You know, we offer tobacco out. And have like maybe meditation, and they might refer to it as prayer even, you know, just having a moment asking the medicines to help them. Like in our belief system, like everything is a medicine, you know.
Yeah.
So not only these items are considered medicine. Water's medicine, you know. This candy would be medicine, you know. It changes the way I'm feeling and thinking. And every medicine is neutral. It can be good or it can be bad, you know, depending on how we use it and how we introduce it into our life. So it's all free will, ultimately, right? Yeah, and that's a big part of our belief system is autonomy and free will. So when some things are happening that maybe people wouldn't agree with, we don't rush in and tell them stop that. We just kind of stand back and watch, and then if it's too against our, you know, we don't want to be involved, we'll just walk away. Just leave it be, because eventually something's going to take care of that, you know.
Things will sort themselves out.
Yeah, right, yeah. I mean, you know, to some degree. So like even with our kids, there's kind of this stigma maybe about how our kids are left to run wild, you know. But that's because they're learning. And if we let them learn on their own, they're going to learn and it will stay with them instead of if we're always stopping them from learning, saying, no, sit down, don't do that, you know, here, I'll do this, you know, anyway. So everybody's kind of in the, on that spectrum of how they raise their kids, and some people, like when we have big family or community events, well, you'll see the wild kids running, you know, and like the Indigenous people, you know, we are, some people are enculturated by the churches or by, you know, colonized institutions and will be embarrassed by that, and other people will be like relieved, you know, like, oh yeah, we have a thing down there that's like kids love to climb on it. It's like a piece of wall that comes out, and it's just, you know, it's like a balance area. Kids love to climb on it, and everyone's always like, oh, you know, but those kids that are here, like my kids, all my kids climbed on that wall, and they learned some pretty good balance, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them bonked their head, as far as I know. You know, yeah, so the belief systems and the, you know, like I said, the autonomy and free will is also, you know, here on campus, and sometimes we butt heads with the state systems that want us to do things exactly a certain way. You know, we're like, well, you know, okay, we'll let you think that, you know.
Yeah, but it's a lot of the same in Sami upbringing and the way of thinking. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
But you mentioned four of your medicines. Is it a thing that they're four, or is it just coincidence that you have four of them here?
So,
Or they're most important ones, you say?
yeah, they're considered the four sacred medicines,
Yeah.
and it's pretty common across American Indian and Canadian tribes that they'll talk about these four sacred medicines. But not everybody has the same four sacred medicines, because not everybody has the same, you know, plants living there. But there was like a common, you'll see patterns of four pretty frequently in a lot of like the literature or stories, or even now in modern architecture, and, you know, like our outfits, and, you know, that four is considered a sacred number. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Nice.
It's a nice way to organize things. It's easy to snap to four.
I mean, it's very balanced. You know, you've got like the four direct.
This is like a thing about Carl's book, a little kiosk that a company made, talking about his.
Do we have
I
any of
suppose
his
the first
art
idea for
on
the book
display?
came when I was growing up in Elin,
A painting.
because all of my friends were trappers, or else they wanted to be trappers. And trapping was something that adolescent boys did in Elin. But there's kind of a gap. Nobody knew anything about the fur trade when I was growing up. That was never talked about. Even Indians never talked about it. Even though on any Indian reservation in Minnesota, there is a fur trade site. Leech Lake has several. Red Lake has about four. The famous ones in Grand Portage, of course. But we didn't know any of that. Nobody ever talked about it. Education in this state was hand in hand with the Americanization program.
So this is Carl's right here. It's called The Flower of the Ojibwe. I don't know where his little card went. Must have fell. It plays all the time. It's Anishinaabe language or music playing. I very intentionally installed a nice stereo system so we could hear it. Language all the time, or music. This happens to be one of the elders, Anna Gibbs Ibun, who's from Red Lake, who was one of the women that helped us start our women's hand drum group. And she was very well respected. You might even say feared People were afraid of her because she was so knowledgeable and stern, but also she, you know, once you got to know her, she was very funny. Yeah, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and we lost her within the last, I think COVID. I think we lost her during COVID.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, so many of the elders have left now. And so now there's younger elders kind of stepping up into those roles with less experiential knowledge and more just, you know, word of mouth or oral tradition. And so we're reclaiming that, you know, recreating some of those experiences as much as possible. But everything has changed.
Yeah.
So it's hard to even reclaim or recreate those situations. But we try as much as possible. One of my quotes that I often use is I learned when I was in Finnmark at Kautokeino, the museum there. There was somebody talking, and we said, I don't know where I was. Anyway, it was a museum in Sámi, and they had like 5 different clothing. You know, it went from like the hide, all hide, then hide and some thread, some cloth and some hide, to all cloth, the gakti, yeah? And I hope I say that right. And so the people we were with asked, so when you wear contemporary clothes, you know, cultural clothes, do people say, oh, that's not real? You should wear the hide clothes. That would be the real, you know, Sami clothing. And the person was like, no, why would anyone say that? You know, and this is the quote: the earth only turns in one direction. Why would we try to go backwards? And I was like, oh, I'm stealing that. You know, because so many of us that are doing reclamation work or, you know, reintroduction of things, we really yearn for the pre-colonization whatever, you know, doings or teachings or, you know, any of it, the knowledge. But we can't ever get back there. There's no way we could ever have that again. So we have to look forward, you know, and build what we can. And it's a good reminder, you know, like it's good to have that knowledge. It's good to, you know, be aware of it, to hold on to as much of the teachings as we can. But we also we're navigating a whole new world, you know. So. Yeah, anyway, so that's what we have art in here. There's all this different kind of art. This is one of the older Ojibwe artists, well known, who is Norval Morrisseau. And that I have a Morrisseau in here is just like amazing to me. I don't know how I got so lucky, but everybody wants it. They're part of the building. I'm like, no. Because he was a contemporary artist who then influenced so many of the Canadian artists, especially with his style. You can see over here even there's some of the similar ideas here. This is William Wilson, who was also involved with those calendars or the star maps. And his art, you know, has some of that same idea of, you know, seeing the outline and the inside, and that we hold so much of the universe within our, you know, within ourselves. Anyway, okay. This guy here is one of my finest pieces of art. Kakakadid Indigenous is, Ejinakazo Kakakadid. And his Indian name is the crow, the black crow. And he's a student here now, and he's a musician. I get word from the other musicians here in the building that he's a superstar. Yeah, so I'm very proud of him. And and he's done production work. Like he has produced his own albums, like 3, and then he has produced his friends' albums as well.
Amazing.
So yeah, that's what he is doing.
Do all of that.
This is porcupine quills. this artist lived at Fond du Lac and married a Fond du Lacer. I do not believe she was Fond du Lac, however. I think she was a Lakota woman. But she was so talented, and her children and grandchildren now are carrying on this tradition. I was just talking with someone, I think she was a student here, but not right now. Anyway, and she says she's working on a project that is kind of like that. These are paintings of a contemporary artist, Jim Denemy, who we lost since the pandemic as well. I love that one on the right because it says Chief sensing tough re-election. Here's our studio. It's messy. I apologize. It just means it's being.
You guys are busy doing things.
Yeah. So
Creating stuff.
you talked about the song that was from the early recordings, the Sámi in 1905, that era.
Yeah.
We have a collection here as well from that same era that ethnomusicologist named Frances Densmore recorded, Ojibwe songs, or she said Chippewa music. And we have a database of her songs all digitized, and then information about each song from the recordings.
Oh,
It's
great.
on that computer over there, but I also have it on my own computer.
Okay. So it's not public. You have, but
Right.
you have. Yes, it is.
It's not. Some of the songs are public,
Yeah.
but because there are sacred songs in
Yeah.
there that people are cautious about, we don't make the entire collection available. But if somebody from Anishinaabe Middaywin teachings comes in and wants to look through those songs, then I introduce them to that collection. It took me probably, I don't know, 20 years to go through training to feel confident enough to open up those recordings. Other people don't feel the same, they feel differently about those recordings, the strength of those recordings, or what those recordings can possibly do, the medicine in those recordings. But I knew that I needed to prepare myself in order to listen to them. And when I first received them, they were all on cassette tapes.
Oh.
And it was like for me, Russian roulette. Like, I'm gonna put this song in, and who knows what it's gonna be, right? So I didn't even listen to any of those. There are some of the less sacred songs out on other recordings through the Library of Congress Folkways recordings. Which I listened to those to satiate any curiosity I had, but then this digital collection was made available to me, and it was handed to me in a jump drive on my hand, and I said, I better get busy. So I went down and I offered tobacco, and I went through initiation process.
Oh, wow.
So then I could then have access to them, or work with them. Anyway, so they're here. And we've shared them with a lodge keeper at Lac de Flambeau, also at Leech Lake and Le Coudray. They have come up and listened to them. But this is very interesting to me. I think it has something to do with that we can't go backwards in time thing. The lodge leadership at one of the main lodges said, oh yeah, I know about those songs. I said, oh, well, I have it digitized so you can know exactly what is in there, what was collected, the information around it. And he's like, what do I want those for? We have songs in our lodge.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, okay. But I mean, that was, really, that was a point that sticks in my mind. Like, right. Because when the people who those songs belonged to, they're gone, right? And maybe they passed them on or shared them with other people in their community, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same potency or the same use of those songs that would have been originally for their medicine doings, yeah. Anyway, so. All right.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. For me, it seems like it seems like the culture and all of that is so intact. Like when I'm comparing it with the Sámi, like I'm just starting to cry. I'm sorry. Like if anyone would hand that to me, I would be so happy, you know, because we don't have that in our culture. It's like the biggest grief of that I have to like carry every day. We don't have that. Like no one would say that, you know. Like how can we preserve our culture because we don't have any of it? So yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to like, but that's one of the big griefs that we have in Sámi, that we're missing so much of.
Yeah.
And the yoiks, I don't even know what yoiks they did when in different ceremonies. Like I don't know what they would yoik. You know, I don't know if they were yoiks that were traditional yoiks or did they just make up something. So it's like that's one of the things that I want to try to find out. But it's very encouraging to hear that there is possibilities. Like even if your people went through the same thing that we did, that your culture, that all of that is still like intact here. You actually have connections, you know. You actually have that in your culture. Yeah, so it's like comparing it to the Sámi people who are so assimilated, so colonized. That's like that's like all we can do is look forward because we don't have anything. We don't find anything, and we look back. Like there's nothing there. To like we don't even know where to. Yeah, sorry about it.
No, I completely understand. Yeah, absolutely.
It's very motivating for me to hear that because maybe there is some way that we can find those, like to know more about stuff.
Yeah, and I think for us here, looking to the natural world, because the relationship with the natural world, of course, is the most important relationship, and that's where some of the older songs have been reclaimed from, is like listening to the songs in nature, and then placing them into an idea of how we would sing them now. You know, even the songs on the Reverb Nation page, which I haven't sent you yet, but I will. We did a recording with some of those older recordings, and we put them in a different form, because the recording that they took in 1910 or whatever was based on taken on a wax cylinder, right? And that was only so much time could be on that wax cylinder, and Frances Densmore, the ethnomusicologist, wanted to capture as much as she could, so she would just have people sing a couple of times through a song, or maybe even just once, whereas now today it's common practice to sing it 4 times. Right? There's that number again. So when we have reclaimed the songs, we will put it into that form of singing it, 4 times, or the vocables, like the yoik part. It will be, put in a different place than maybe it was prior to, or when they collected it on the wax cylinder. There's like we do this one's on my mind because someone just asked me about it. It's called a Little Girl's War Song. Nina bem ga mokona wen ga. So then the rest is like, just the vocables, yeah? And there's that little part of words in there that says, my sweetheart has been wounded. My husband is wounded, because the little girls are playing war, you know, and that's in their imagination what they might be singing about. So when we redid it, we had a lead, and then the whole group came in, and then we had little girls in the studio. So then they were singing, and actually my son Xander, did he follow us? No. He was the leader of the little girls, because he has this amazing ear. He can learn something like that, you know. So he was leading the little girls in his little girl voice. He was like, yeah. Anyway, and so it's fun, you know. We can hear that at the beginning of that recording that we did. We put the track of one of the actual recordings, and I got in trouble from the Library of Congress, but I don't care.
You're like, copyright didn't exist for this.
Here's this Finntiaanit Maila. I'll show you a picture.
Oh, is that the one that's in Finnish you're talking
Yeah, and then there's the documentary. I'll find Becky. There's Becky and Jim.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. on their property there.
Oh, cool.
He just passed not too long ago, about a year ago. Finndian.
Yeah.
yeah. Fintiaanit Maila. Yeah.
Take a picture of that.
On archive.org, I think archive.gov, archive.net, that has old books in it. Yeah, there's the Chippewa Music volumes 1 and 2 is on there. And so now that I'm saying that, I wonder how much Sami stuff is on the archive.net. I don't know if that's just a United States collection, or because when I was working on my PhD 2 years ago, I was down at the University of Minnesota, and I was looking at all of their Sami music things they have. They have a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the recordings, they have recordings there as well, and you can listen to them there in their music library. Albums, like I think, I don't think I because they're analog, you know, so I couldn't do like this, you know. But yeah, and I was surprised.
Interesting. Like they're analog recordings of Sami people.
Yeah.
With like yoiks or.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
The Carl
Yeah.
Tieren, you know? The Carl Tieren?
Oh, it's called Tiren. Yeah.
It could be
Okay.
that from the
Okay.
wax cylinders.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh-huh.
It's called Tiren. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is actually online now.
Is it? Oh yeah, there is some stuff online too. Yeah.
Carl Tiren is online.
Yeah.
I think all of it, but yeah.
Yeah. If I had to do a report for my ethnomusicology class, and if I find it, I'll send it to you, because I'm sure I have a bunch of, you know, the resources that I utilized for that report, which was basically just kind of like a comparative sound between Anishinaabe singing and Yoik, you know, even though it's regional, but it's regional here too, right? Like how we sing is specific to region. Okay, this is the latest one with those older recordings.
Oh. With you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And this is our first one. This is the one that we won a Native American Music Award.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Wow.
A NAMI. We came back NAMI winners.
Oh,
And then all of the chaos ensued.
all the chaos.
We were the first women's group to win the Best Traditional Recording Award.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was chaotic.
Oh yeah. Then people were like, you know, what are they doing? How dare they? Yeah. Yeah.